Finally, Tesla shares. We teased those tech results earlier. Tesla did report after the close yesterday, booked a 9% sales drop from the same time a year ago, its biggest sales drop going back more than a decade, since 2012, just about 2 years after its 2010 IPO. Said automotive sales dropped 13%, booked $21.3 billion in sales versus $22.2 billion expected, and did earn less per share than expected, 45 cents versus the 51 cents expected. I should note that the stock is up pre-market, and that's because of some comments from Elon Musk trying to juice the stock a little bit there. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So as Tesla reported, and I do want to bring in our next guest. He's an analyst to help us break down the performance. He's a CEO of Equity Set, Tony Zapparo. Tony, thank you so much for joining me on set here.
Glad to be here.
And what's your reaction? What's your takeaway from these results?
I think the results were a sigh of relief, right, for the market. The stock had really been kind of hammered down almost 40% or more year to date. And so the results themselves, I don't think are a big game changer in terms of expectations to the upside. And so I think what you're getting here is a little bit of a relief rally, right? Another huge angle that I think investors or traders in the stock are liking is it seems like Elon is focused again, or when he was doing the call and going through the analyst questions, he's like the CEO of old, right, in terms of hyper-focused on what the company's doing, profitability, and really trying to cut costs and drive sales and autonomy in the future.
Mm-hmm. So just a few headlines here that I see. Tesla surging after Musk says new affordable EV models are coming. Are you optimistic about that?
It hasn't been the best track record in terms of timing when they've made some promises with the Roadster, of course, years ago, and it's still not developed. I think this might be a little bit different, and so that $25,000 and cheaper price point, right, they said could be as soon on the production line as the end of this year, but most likely 2025. So I think if you're banking on that, maybe try to look out a little bit more, 2025, 2026. But I feel like they have a lot of pressure on them to be able to produce that. So I think it will come to fruition a little bit more.
And I think amid some of these headlines, right, we in the past 24 hours, 48 hours, have heard of quite a few layoffs actually in Tesla facilities around the world. And so how does that factor into meeting these production goals when you have fewer workers?
Yeah, and I think there was probably a little bit of bloat, and hopefully they're not making too many cuts in order to understaff. But I think if we know anything about Elon and how he runs kind of his ship, it's pushing people to their max. And so I think with less people, they're going to, for at least maybe 6, 12, 24 months, be able to push people to their limits, right? Work harder. And then the question will be, can they continue to support that production with a leaner staff?
My only response to that would be is that we have heard about how dire some of the circumstances are, according to reports on these, production factory floors, that people are already working very long hours, kind of fueled by the hype, if you will, or the belief in this visionary founder who's Musk.
Yeah, and I think it is a real risk to how much they can produce with softening demand, and kind of as he projects out the next year or two and EV market rolling over a little. I think he's trying to plan for that softening demand and then utilizing the same production line. And that was one big thing he had mentioned, is they don't need any new facilities for this cheaper model that they're rolling out. And so I think it's going to be a balancing act, and it might come back to haunt him and the stock. But if anyone can pull it off, I think he could.
What is your call on Tesla right now in terms of whether it's a buy, hold, or a sell, and your price target?
Yeah, and so we were actually bears on the way down, and we really felt that 145 was a major gap, right, in the price action of the chart, and we felt it needed to cover that before it could potentially consolidate and go higher. And so we actually switched views when it hit that 145, and now we're bullish. Now, in terms of price targets, obviously it's moving up a lot today, and that's the way it kind of trades. But I think a 200 price target is a good 3 to 6 month outlook. And I think it could bounce around that, right? Based on the trading action, it could be there in a week, right? If euphoria kind of takes hold. But we do feel like end of year target's about 200 as a fair value price. And then the year after that, right, so 2025, there's no reason we don't think if things go well, it couldn't be 250 to 300 in price target.
Do you think Elon Musk is the right person to lead this company?
I think he's the only person that can right now. And I think it would take a transitional effort to get somebody else in that wouldn't just be overwhelmed, right, with the way he's running it. Because kind of as we just talked earlier, the way he pushes people, the way he potentially motivates people, a lot of people are spread thin. And I think somebody else coming in, it would take a hit, right? It would either increase costs because staffing has to go up, or it would decrease production. So I think a transition would have to occur. And so I think he's the only one that can ride it out for the next year or two.
I see another headline here. Musk is keeping investors' dreams of a Tesla Robotaxi alive. Are you thinking that a Robotaxi is actually in the works?
I think it's in the works. I think the scalability he talks about in terms of like the revenue impact it could have, I don't know, right? He's kind of paving the way. He obviously did it with EVs. And so I'm a bit ignorant, right, on how big this could be. And again, they address some regulatory hurdles and the fact that other movers in the market are trying to kind of break those down. And so I think his main play, and he stated it a couple of times, it's automation, right? He said, if you think of Tesla as a car company, he goes, you probably shouldn't buy it, right? Not in those exact words, but basically we're automation and storage and the future wave. And so I think Robotaxi is one step towards that, but I think, again, that's not his end goal. It's just a step of an automotive company going to automation to then use that for something else.
Mm-hmm. In terms of what happens going forward and his inner circle around him, I know you think Musk is the right guy for the job, but do you think that could evolve over time, especially as we have seen public reports about some concerns on the board?
Yeah, I think it has to. And I think, again, just a couple months earlier, all the headlines were distractions, they were negative, right? Because again, it was taking his focus around what he was doing. Ever since the whole Twitter acquisition, I feel sentiment turned on anything he was doing, whether it's visionary or not. It was pulling him away from his job at Tesla. And I think at least temporarily that's shifted a bit, but I think he's going to run into the same track, right? And it might be another 6 months, but I think the distractions will come back for him because he is that visionary founder. And so I do think they're talking probably about changes sooner than later and how to do that right so that it doesn't shake things up.
You know, I had a chance to take a spin in the Cybertruck.
Okay.
Have you been in one?
I have not. What'd you think of it?
I have to say, the ride was pretty smooth.
Okay.
The tailgate, which is basically what the back is pretty cool. And for me, it was interesting to see that it kind of is this merge of what would be a pickup truck and a sedan, right? Mm-hmm. So the back seats are pretty spacious, more spacious than pickup trucks that I've been in at least. The tailgate, or back of the vehicle, which you could use to tailgate, was pretty nice, and as I said, the ride was smooth. So I was impressed with it, and it got a lot of looks, actually. We took a ride
Did you have
around
any
New York
objections
City.
to the look of it, or are you...
You know, my objection to the look of it is all of those fingerprints on the outside.
Okay.
Doesn't really make sense to me. I feel like switching that out might make sense, and it is a very large vehicle, so I don't know how many we will see in New York City, but it did get a lot of looks in New York City. Do you think that this could be a game changer for Tesla?
I think it'll help drive new product line, right? And I think it's almost the same thing of I've seen a lot more Rivians driving around than I thought, right? And I guess for me, the visual appeal of a Rivian and the Cybertruck isn't necessarily there. I definitely think the interior, the drivability, the technology is second to none. And so I think it'll help bolster sales a little bit, but that's why I think they're pushing that cheaper model, and autonomy is because I think it's a wave that will end the next year or two and sales will kind of plateau.
Tony, great to get your take joining us on set from Chicago. We appreciate that. And Tony's going to join us a little bit later in the show, just in about 20 minutes time, to talk about another stock on his radar. That's Palantir, so we look forward to that.
Thank you.